Hey, everybody. It is Thursday, May 1st, 2025. You're listening to the Mo News Podcast. New month, same us. I'm Moshe Winunu.
And I'm Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to.
And Moshe, it's
gonna be May. Did we miss the opportunity yesterday?
I think so.
Now that it's actually May, because it's not gonna be May like it has been May for at least a few hours.
Except I would guess most people listen to this podcast in the morning. Yeah. So I think we're okay.
I think we're okay. You know, listen, at the end of the day, we are here to celebrate millennial holidays. And there's probably, I think that this is one of the biggies. It's going to be May. It's like one of the most important parts of being a millennial beyond like avocado toast and having burned a lot of CDs 25 years ago.
And in case anybody out there is saying, what are Jill and Moshe talking about right now?
Very few of you probably, but go ahead, Jill, explain.
There's an NSYNC song circa 2000, and it is called It's Gonna Be Me, but Justin Timberlake sings it like it's gonna be May. So that has become an instant meme.
Jill, if you're looking for explanation, Timberlake has explained that the Swedish producers of It's Gonna Be Me, with their accent, said, no, make it sound more like May for the purposes of the song. So, you know, a young Justin Timberlake was like, okay, whatever you say, producers.
Right.
And there you have it. Music history. Welcome to May. This is a big month for me, Jill. This is my birthday month.
You're a Gemini cusper, right?
On the first day, allegedly the first day of Gemini, May 21st. We sometimes get into the zodiac here on the podcast. But yes, allegedly the first day of Gemini is May 21st. And you can ask my wife, but I definitely have a number of the best Gemini traits and some of the not so great Gemini traits. We're great communicators, though, Jill. You're a fellow Gemini.
As are many journalists.
Yeah, it's a communication sign, an air sign, or whatever. You know, the thing. It's a thing.
Okay, let's get to some news.
No, Jill, should we just keep reading our horoscopes for the rest of the podcast?
I'm sure that's what everyone's here for. To the headlines now, starting with the economy. It contracted in the first part of the year, meaning we are halfway to a recession. A look behind the numbers. Blame it on the tariffs. Experts warn empty shelves could be headed to a store near you. We'll tell you when.
Yeah, we'll tell you what we're tracking at the Port of Los Angeles and why it matters.
Overseas, Pakistan and India are inching toward a military conflict. Some background on the latest escalation here.
Yes, we'll dive into the history of Kashmir to explain what may unfold here in the coming days and weeks.
Over at the Supreme Court, the justices appear open to approving state-funded religious schools. A follow-up to that story we told you about, the judge in Wisconsin has now been suspended after being charged in that federal immigration case. Elon Musk bidding farewell, kind of, to President Trump's cabinet.
Is he ever going anywhere, Jill? I think that Elon guy, he's definitely going to keep making headlines and keep influencing.
Whether he is at the White House or not.
Officially or not, correct.
New York State getting closer to banning cell phones in schools, even during lunch and free periods. The newest health trend taking over social media, fart walks. Yes, fart walks. We'll explain.
Are they really different than regular walks, Jill?
No, it's just a walk.
I like that, like in the media, they always like come up with like, we have a new thing. We discovered a new trend.
Speaking of fart walks, Shake Shack summer menu is here. What's on it? Thought you'd like that one.
That's how you know that Shake Shack did not sponsor this podcast.
And Moshe is on this day in history.
Jill, speaking of millennial holidays, we'll discuss a crucial moment in millennial history on this day in history. A technology that was probably the most important thing to us for a few years. It's
got to be the iPhone, right?
Certainly, Jill, an important technology. I wouldn't just say for millennials, like I feel like for everyone. This is a millennial-specific technology.
Okay. I will stick around for the end of the podcast, Moshe.
That's great to hear, Jill. Otherwise, I'll get very lonely at the end of the podcast.
All right, let's start with the economy. Some new data shows we are halfway to a recession. The U.S. GDP, or gross domestic product, shrunk by 0.3% in the first quarter, January through March. It is the first economic contraction since 2022. A contraction means the overall value of goods and services a country produces is shrinking, which usually signals that the economy is slowing down. Businesses may be selling less, hiring less, or even laying people off. Consumers might be spending less or saving more because of uncertainty. So we are one quarter into this economic contraction. Technically, 2 quarters of negative growth is the definition of a recession.
Now, one thing to keep in mind, not to create more complications here, is sometimes we get revisions on the GDP. So we might, after another quarter, revise the first quarter up or down. Nonetheless, though, Jill, regardless of, and this week came up during Biden, whether we're technically in a recession or not technically in a recession, a lot of major bank bosses, financial experts, et cetera, feel we're already in a recession based on just the trajectory of the markets, tariffs, et cetera, in the past few weeks.
Okay, so let's look behind the numbers here. There was a surge in imports, up more than 50%, likely because companies were looking to import or bring products into the United States before President Trump imposed his tariffs. Economists point out that companies investing in a rise in imports, well, that subtracted about 5 percentage points from the overall GDP. So perhaps this overall number not quite as bad as it seems, but still companies were doing that in preparation for tariffs and spending instead of investing in growing their businesses or hiring new employees. Still, at a cabinet meeting on Wednesday, President Trump attempting to pin the drop in GDP to President Biden.
And I have to start off by saying that's Biden. That's not Trump, because we came in on January, this is the quarterly numbers, and we came in and I was very against everything that Biden was doing in terms of the economy, destroying our country.
He also wrote on Truth Social that it's going to take some time for the economy to start improving. He wrote, quote, "Tariffs will soon start kicking in and companies are starting to move into the USA in record numbers. Our country will boom, but we have to get rid of the Biden overhang." He says this will take a while. It has nothing to do with tariffs, that is in all caps, only that Biden left us with bad numbers. When the boom begins, it will be like no other. Be patient.
Yes, that's his message on social media, Jill. But if you look at the polling, even among Republicans, I should say non-MAGA Republicans, people who have supported Trump, right now it looks like people are going to pin the blame on all of this on Trump's policies here in the first quarter.
Yeah, that message not really resonating with Americans. As we reported yesterday, consumer sentiment is way down. Consumers are feeling pretty bad about the economy, and a majority of them, as you mentioned, blaming it on Trump and his tariff plan. Some big box retailers and people who run the nation's ports are also warning that it's only a matter of time until we could see some empty store shelves. One stat that really caught my attention: ocean freighters called off about 80 trips from China to the United States this month, which is almost 60% more cancellations than during the peak of the COVID-19 supply chain interruption in May of 2020. Remember that?
Jill, do I remember the supply chain disruption of 2020? My parents filled my room from growing up with toilet paper.
They're still using it.
They're still using it 5 years later.
The executive director of the Port of Los Angeles told CNBC's Becky Quick on Wednesday morning that a lot of retailers have stopped all shipments from China and probably have about 5 to 7 weeks of product left.
And it's a precipitous drop in volume, with a number of major American retailers stopping all shipments from China based on the tariffs.
Yeah, the China piece of that is the most interesting. That's where the shipments are basically ground to a halt, you've said?
Yes, that's correct. And that makes up about 45% of our business here in Los Angeles.
So, Jill, unfortunately, as we've learned now several years ago, our understanding of the supply chain is there's this whole domino effect. Basically, every ship that left after April 9th from China is now subject to these tariffs. What did that mean? A lot of companies said, we're not ordering anything. So you are seeing now the traffic numbers decline. And we're literally talking about hundreds of thousands of containers that would typically be coming into all these West Coast ports. The West Coast ports, geographically speaking, totally logically, take in a lot of the product from China. So we're talking LA, Long Beach, San Francisco, all the way up to Seattle there. At the same time, some of the Chinese ships go through the Panama Canal into the East Coast. So the ports of Houston, all the way through Florida, all the way up to New York, they will also be seeing the impact here. And by feeling the impact, we mean seeing less ships. So what does that mean? Well, in many cases, anticipating this, some of the larger companies, the Walmarts, the Targets, the Amazons, were able to stock up in anticipation of the tariffs. But if you're a medium-sized business or a small business, you don't have the liquidity to do that sort of thing. And so in many cases, they might already be feeling the pinch or will be feeling it the next couple of weeks with inventory. And what does that mean? You go to a store and they don't have all the colors or all the sizes that you are accustomed to. And the thing with China, a reminder here, is we buy about $500 billion a year of goods from China. The majority of our furniture, majority of our apparel, batteries, all these like from little to big, most appliances, appliance parts. So what does that mean? In practical cases, your air conditioner breaks over the summer. Your local repair person might not have a part for it because the company hasn't ordered those parts because they don't want to pay 145% tariff on those parts. So just to like narrow this down, let's say you buy something from China and it costs $100. With 145% tariffs, you're paying $145 tariff on it at the port, and you're still marking it up for profit, right? And so in many cases, companies have said, no. We see the flux that's happening. We're just not going to bother to order anything from China right now until all this stuff gets settled. Well, what's the issue there? Well, suddenly, let's say the tariff issue gets settled in the next few weeks. Everyone hits buy on their products. Where are the ships? Are the ships in the right place to pick that stuff up? Because in many cases, the ships are in other places around the world, but haven't gone to China because no one's ordering stuff from China. So you can see how this domino effect happens, right? Because then also in the US, they're going to potentially lay off truck drivers. They're going to lay off port workers. So again, in this example, say tariffs get dropped, people start ordering again. There's not enough truck drivers. There's not enough port workers. The ships are not in place. And so you could see here, even if 145% tariffs go away in the next few weeks or months, you're going to see some shortages, but then you're going to see further shortages going into, let's say, 2026, because everything will be out of place. And that's what happens with the supply shock that we saw during the pandemic. And that's the concern here in this situation.
So as we mentioned, some of the experts saying that we could see supply shortages in 5 to 7 weeks, but they're also pointing to big shopping times of the year, like back to school, even as far away as Christmas, that they're warning that we might see some disruptions in terms of products on the shelves.
Yeah, it's interesting watching and speaking to some of the experts here. Jill, our producer Lauren, spoke to someone yesterday who we included in our afternoon newsletter yesterday, who said that like you might even think about buying your Christmas gifts now. I mean, I know it's crazy to think about, but like if you're looking for certain things, or if like, you're planning to have a child, like you might already look for that stroller or that crib or that chair in advance. The majority of baby goods come from China. The majority of toys come from China. The majority of Christmas related stuff comes from China. And so even if, again, this gets resolved, most major stores do their ordering 6 to 9 months out. So they've paused their orders right now in April. Well, what's 9 months from April? December. And so, one of the things to watch here is what happens in 5 to 7 weeks, what happens down the road once there's resolution. But in these big shopping periods, if there's certain things that you're going to need, now might be the time to purchase them, depending on how long this goes. Now, one caution we should give you, I'm told that toilet paper will not be an issue. I know you're all going to run and get toilet paper, but FYI. And also secondarily, and probably much more importantly than toilet paper, food. Most of our food is sourced here domestically or on the continent or from Mexico. And so majority of our food does not come from China. So don't empty the grocery store shelves unnecessarily right now. It's the other items, basically everything else in our life that typically has a China link to it.
Food and toilet paper, they kind of go together. That's a little disgusting. I'm sorry.
Well, this is important. People are like, Moshe, what should I buy now? And I'm like, you're good on food and toilet paper. Everything else is a good question mark right now.
Stock up. All right, now to an important story that we're watching overseas as Pakistan and India, two neighboring countries with nuclear weapons, inch closer to war, or at the very least, a military conflict. It follows that deadly Islamic terror attack on Hindu tourists in the disputed Kashmir region last week. India accuses Pakistan of backing the massacre. Pakistan denies it. So far, India and Pakistan have downgraded their diplomatic ties and threatened to suspend key treaties, and they've expelled each other's nationals. It is the biggest breakdown in relations since 2019. That is when a suicide car bombing killed 40 Indian soldiers in Kashmir. Again, India had blamed Pakistan. Pakistan said it wasn't them. This time around, India is hinting at the possibility of a limited military strike, but there is huge pressure domestically on India to respond because most of the victims last week were Indian. So as of this recording, we are still waiting to see what happens. The concern, of course, is that a, quote, limited military strike could escalate into something that is far more serious.
Yeah, that's always the concern here where the Indian government feels obligated to respond here. Several dozen of their citizens were murdered in cold blood by this terrorist group in Kashmir, and there's a lot of pressure on the government to do something about it. And they try to draw this link to Pakistan. Now, at the end of the day, Pakistan does have linkage, the Pakistani government does have linkage to certain Islamic terror groups, but they say, well, they don't know what this group was about. This is a group called the Resistance Front, but the Indians are trying to draw a link from Resistance Front to a more well-known group called Lashkar-e-Taiba, which does have links and a base of operations inside Pakistan. Again, Pakistan says we have to investigate what happened here. We had nothing to do with this, but India likes to point the finger there. A little background here for those of you who are unfamiliar. All this dates back to 1947. Back then, there was British India, and they basically did a partition where they created mostly Muslim Pakistan and mostly Hindu India. Well, what sits in between those two countries? Kashmir. And there's a dispute over that region. Now, the region, Kashmir itself, is predominantly Muslim, but at the time, there was a Hindu monarch over Kashmir, and he said, I'm going with India here. And over the last 80 years or so, there's been a dispute. Several wars fought over it back in the 60s, early 70s. There's a line of control. About 2/3 of Kashmir is with India. The rest is with Pakistan. The dispute remains unresolved here. That's where we sit in 2025, is you've had these militant groups, these terror groups, conduct attacks multiple times. Back in 2019, Jill, you mentioned that led to kind of an escalation. In this case, it looks like we're going to face a similar situation. One of the concerns about the situation, well, there's no shortage of global conflicts happening right now between Ukraine, between Israel, Gaza, a variety of places. So the world is sort of like, can we just keep things chill here, India and Pakistan? 2, this is a rare situation. There are only a handful of countries on Earth with nuclear weapons. In this case, you have 2 countries that have fought wars against each other on each other's border, both with nukes. So that's always the concern. If things escalate, get out of hand, accidents happen, that we could get to that point. And that's always a very big concern. And so at the White House, at the Pentagon, like whenever there's disputes between India and Pakistan, that rises to the top, given the arsenals these guys have. Secretary of State Rubio, for his part, said he will reach out to India and Pakistan and urge other foreign governments to also step in here and try to calm things down. But the Indian government, for the sake of its domestic politics, feels like it has to do something here. Pakistan will then probably have to return. And so the question is, hopefully we don't see anything escalate. This feels like potentially, Jill, a sort of Iran-Israel situation where one side does something, the other side feels a need to respond. Does then the other side then need to respond to the response? And then when do we basically end this round? We sort of see how this is going. Hopefully it doesn't escalate significantly.
I feel like the world in general is just like India, Pakistan. We've got enough on our plate.
Right, like 2025 is not your year. Can you guys just can you press pause until we downshift some of the other global conflicts happening?
Okay, time for the speed read from the Washington Post. During arguments Wednesday, the U.S. Supreme Court seemed open to saying that the nation's first religious public charter school can operate in Oklahoma. It would be a blockbuster decision that would reshape the boundaries of education and also the separation of church and state. A ruling for St. Isidore of Seville Virtual Catholic School would allow direct and complete taxpayer funding for a faith-based school for the first time, which means government sponsorship of a school that expects students to adhere to its Catholic beliefs and its religious mission. It could also lead to a number of new religious schools that are funded entirely by tax dollars.
So some background here. Like 45 other states, Oklahoma has a charter school system to allow some schools more flexibility, more autonomy, more specialization. Under state and federal law, charter schools are defined as public schools. What does that mean? That they must be open and they must be non-sectarian. But you've had some religious groups in recent years that are trying to test that. And this will be a key test for whether charter schools can be religious and frankly, whether taxpayers are being seen as funding religion or not. Now, the Supreme Court is majority conservative, and Brett Kavanaugh, as part of the arguments yesterday, one of the conservatives, said that excluding the school from the state's charter school system would amount to rank discrimination against religion. And you got the same sense from a couple other conservatives who felt that not allowing a religious charter school would in fact be discrimination against religion, as opposed to, what has been more traditional in terms of Supreme Court view, that it inserts religion into the public sphere and that taxpayers are paying for religion. And that's the argument that Sonia Sotomayor, on behalf of the liberals, was making yesterday. She said that the essence of the First Amendment's prohibition on the government establishment of religion is we're not going to pay religious leaders to teach their religion. Now, interesting about St. Isidore's is it is open to all faiths. They must abide by state anti-discrimination rules. School materials, though, say that admission assumes the student and family willingness to adhere with respect to the beliefs and procedures of the school. Students are also at the school required to attend Catholic Mass and support the religious mission of the school. So that's at the dispute here. The main question, again, whether the First Amendment permits or even requires states to sponsor or finance religious charter schools, which are, again, public schools with autonomy. So is it discrimination against religion or discrimination against those who don't want the government establishment of religion? And you saw these arguments playing out, Jill. Though this is a unique case. As you guys are aware, there are 9 Supreme Court justices, an odd number to deal with potential conflicts, right? To prevent ties. Now, this is a case where Amy Coney Barrett has recused herself. She hasn't really explained it publicly, but there's an understanding that she is friends with someone at one of the law schools that's representing one of the litigants in this case. Coney Barrett is out. So technically, it's 5 conservatives and 3 liberals, and 8 justices will determine this. John Roberts is the one we're looking at. John Roberts, the conservative, the Chief Justice. He didn't make very clear where he stands on this. And if he goes with the liberals, which he sometimes does, you could have a 4-4 tie. And in the case of the Supreme Court, a tie goes to the lower court. Basically, the Supreme Court's like, we tied. Whatever the last court that ruled on this, that stands as the law. So that would then fall on the Oklahoma Supreme Court, which ruled against the school in this case, meaning that ultimately the school could not be taxpayer funded, that we can't have religious charter schools in Oklahoma. There would be no new national precedent, and those advocates would have to go find a new case for this sort of thing. So that's something interesting to watch here, is that while at least 4 of the conservatives appear to be in line with the school here, the 3 liberals against, that one case, John Roberts, he could go with the liberals here, and we could get a tie at the end of June, early July, something for us to watch for.
From CNBC, Elon Musk, the head of Doge, claimed Wednesday that his federal workforce slashing initiative so far has saved $160 billion, which sounds like a lot, but it is far less than his original projections. And he seemed to give kind of a farewell to President Trump's cabinet on Wednesday. He was at the White House for the cabinet meeting. Musk thanked the president. Trump thanked him back. Here's a little bit of their exchange.
Thank you. And it's also an honor to work with your incredible cabinet. I just like to say thank you, everyone, for your, it's great to work with you.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Musk also said that a, quote, tremendous amount has been accomplished in the first 100 days, more than has been accomplished in any administration before, ever. So he says this portends very well for what happens for the rest of the administration. President Trump told Musk he can stay as long as he wants, but at some point he understands Musk wants to get back home to his cars.
And when we say to his cars, we mean his auto company, the most valuable auto company in America, his space company, his social media company, all his various companies. Jill, it appears he's no longer working out of the office he was working and sleeping out of in the White House complex there. But nonetheless, they do expect him to continue to play a virtual role. But specifically, he was a special government employee, and there is a very specific time limit to how long you could be a special government employee that runs out this month. Now, speaking of his cars or car company, Tesla, earnings last week, we told you, where profit was significantly down, revenue was down. And so there is this feeling that he does need to come back. And then even on the announcement that he was coming back, you did see the stock rise. Investors say, like, thank God, like he's back to his companies and not focused on the Doge effort. At the same time, Jill, you get this feeling that he has this very close relationship with Trump. Trump wants him around. Trump tends to talk to a lot of people on his cell phone. And so I can't imagine that even if he's not sleeping in the White House complex anymore and there on a day-to-day basis in the West Wing, Elon's been with him in Mar-a-Lago. Elon's flying with him. I don't know that he's going to be able to give up that kind of influence, that role, that connection to the president there. So I don't think he's going anywhere like significantly away, even if physically he doesn't have like an official role in the White House anymore.
But he's just going to keep popping up. I mean, who are we kidding?
Elon.
Why wouldn't he? By the way, if you have access to the president and the White House, kind of nice. And
one of the largest social media companies in the world. He also, I imagine, will be chiming in several times a day, as he has been doing.
All right, from the Associated Press, the Wisconsin Supreme Court has now suspended a judge accused of helping a man evade immigration authorities. The FBI took Milwaukee County Circuit Judge Hannah Dugan into custody Friday morning at the county courthouse. She faces federal charges of concealing an individual to prevent his discovery and arrest. and obstructing or impeding a proceeding. In its 2-page order, the state's Supreme Court said it was acting on its own initiative and not responding to a request from anybody. The court ruled in part, we conclude in our own motion that it is in the public interest that she be temporarily relieved of her official duties.
Yeah, this is the case we've been talking about in the newsletter, on Instagram, in our podcast. The migrant in question is this guy named Eduardo Flores Ruiz. He was facing charges of assault in her courtroom. She had become aware that there were immigration agents in the hallway, and we're waiting for her full clarity on this. She allowed Flores Ruiz to be in the jury box and then exit through a private door with his attorney, thereby, as far as the government's concerned, making it difficult for them to arrest him. Now, eventually, he makes his way into the hallway. An agent sees him, rides the elevator with him and his attorney, doesn't understand what they're saying in Spanish. He makes a break for it, and then eventually immigration agents are able to get him outside the courthouse. Nonetheless, the administration trying to set a precedent here. They said what the judge did was unacceptable. It was very clear in letting him through that private back door, which they don't typically allow folks with cases before the court to do, that she was trying to obstruct his arrest by immigration authorities. Now, she is set to appear for an arraignment on May 15th. As you mentioned above, she's relieved from her duties for now. And we're waiting for clarity from Dugan and her attorney as to exactly why she did what she did, and then whether another judge is going to determine if she broke the law.
Okay, from CBS News, the state of New York, close to banning cell phones from schools. New York Governor Kathy Hochul says that a $254 billion state budget deal has been reached, including what she calls a bell-to-bell school cell phone ban. It would take effect next school year, making New York the largest state in the country with a bell-to-bell cell phone ban. Hochul says the plan will help protect kids from addictive technology and improve their mental health. The New York State Teachers Union also came out in support of the ban. They say that we are, quote, at a crisis point. Hochul says that we need classrooms where young minds can flourish, and that means eliminating once and for all the digital distractions that steal our kids' attention. She says we protected our kids from cigarettes, alcohol, and drunk driving, and now we are protecting them from the addictive technology designed to hijack their attention. Moshe, I've been following this story closely, not just as a parent, but as a journalist based, of course, in New York and on Long Island. And there was some pushback from schools that felt like they wanted to create their own policy where they would have some limitations on cell phones, but they didn't want it to be bell to bell, as the governor described. But there was a big push on her part. Jonathan Haidt, who you interviewed over for the Interview podcast, he wrote The Anxious Generation that really got a lot of this conversation about the pitfalls of kids and cell phones. He really got this discussion going. He even put out a video on social media, of all places, urging parents in New York to get behind this.
We should add that the governor has said that exemptions can be made if a student requires a device to manage a medical situation, or there's some unique circumstances, they need it for translation purposes. The proposal will also let individual schools come up with their own ways to implement the ban, their own ways to store the devices. It would also require schools to make sure parents have a way to contact their children during the day if needed. I know that's been a big thing, and sadly in the era of school shootings that we live in. Nonetheless, this has been a big push in multiple states. Florida is one of them. There have been others. California is working on their own ban. And there's a lot of evidence to suggest, and we've heard this from teachers in the Mo News community, that ultimately these devices, the individual devices, have only served as a distraction in the classroom, that in some cases, even during recess, they see some of the small kids on their own devices, like they're, adults, not interacting, not socializing with each other. A very different era, Jill, from the hallways that, we used to roam in high school.
Okay, from the New York Post, the latest trend on TikTok. You heard it here first. Fart walks.
Go on.
Mosh, they're exactly what they said.
Oh, fart is not like it's not like an acronym. It's like a literal. Okay, good.
It's just a fart. They are exactly what they sound like. This latest health and wellness trend embraces the simple joys of letting loose on an evening stroll. It's actually coined by the Canadian cookbook author Marilyn Smith. She claims the so-called fart walk could be the low-effort longevity secret that you have been looking for. She says she and her husband typically go on 60-minute fart walks after dinner, which helps, again, with their longevity. And to the science behind it, the primary goal is to aid digestion and ward off serious diseases.
The flatulence fitness routine that you've all been waiting to hear about. Jill, this is just an after dinner walk, right?
Where you have no shame in your game if you have to let out some gas, you do.
I think an after dinner walk is really good. I think we've known about this for a very long time, that going on that walk after a meal is helpful. I like that, they are coining it this to make it sort of trendy and to make you feel like you should have no shame in said walk. It's interesting. This cookbook author is like, well, this is helping us reduce our chances of type 2 diabetes. Unclear. I don't know if the medical studies are out on just the number, like if you engage in flatulence, but it's definitely not good to hold them in. So, listen, I think ultimately the medical doctors who you speak to on this are like, yeah, that's a great idea. Let it all out. Walking after meals does promote intestinal motility, movement of our intestines. It prevents constipation. And apparently, if you don't move after a meal, it's not good. Cramping, bloating, discomfort. So I think this is just like, especially what you do after Thanksgiving, but on a daily basis. Go for that walk. You do it outdoors and you got nothing to feel guilty about. And always remember the age-old rule, Jill. Whoever smelt it, dealt it.
So basically, though, if you go on a walk and it's not right after a meal, it's just a walk. But if you go on a walk after a meal, it's called a fart walk. That's the difference. For
some of us, almost every walk is a fart walk, Jill. In the morning, in the afternoon, name your time of day.
And again, speaking of fart walks from CNBC, summer's almost here, which for Shake Shack means the return of barbecue to its menu. The burger chain announcing a lineup of barbecue-inspired burgers, sandwiches, and fries. The menu arrives at Shake Shack tomorrow.
So, Jill, they got a lot of options here on this menu. They got the Carolina barbecue burger. They got a smoky classic barbecue chicken. They got spicy cheese fries with ranch. Definitely need to go on a fart walk after that. I am in New York City, the home of the original Shake Shack. So next time I'm in Madison Square Park, there's the OG Shake Shack. But now, obviously it's a global thing. So, I haven't been there in a while. I know that the West Coasters are much more into In-N-Out. I have to say, despite my East Coast home, I will give more points to In-N-Out over Shake Shack. But this is certainly something I might try this summer.
Just save 60 minutes afterward. For the fart walk.
For the walk, not the CBS show.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
All right. Now time for On This Day in History for this May 1st. Many of you may remember where you were 14 years ago tonight. It was a Sunday night. President Obama announces the death of Osama bin Laden during a U.S. commando operation that had taken place the previous night. It ended a 10-year manhunt for bin Laden. They were able to get him in this complex he was living in Abbottabad, Pakistan. We're able to take him out. It was a very dramatic thing. It's been depicted in films and documentaries. One of the helicopters has issues. They have to pivot to another helicopter. An incredible thing. There's that famous photo of them in the Situation Room, all nervously watching what was taking place. That's now turned into a meme, but remarkable announcement on this day 14 years ago.
Ironically, I and many Americans were watching The Apprentice.
Yes, and some people actually like to compare the speech that Obama made that night announcing bin Laden's death versus the speech that Trump made in the death of Baghdadi, the head of ISIS. And Obama was very sort of traditional and flowery in his language. And then Trump's announcement years later when he kills the head of ISIS is he died like a dog. Anyway, there's a video that has been served to me several times on Instagram that contrasts the announcements the two of them made.
Everyone's got their own style.
Everyone's got their own style in announcing the death of a terrorist leader. All right, a couple other items on this day. 94 years ago, the Empire State Building officially opened in New York City, 102 stories. Was the tallest building in the world until the 1970s, and now it's way down there on the list. Jill, on this day in technology history, this is what I alluded to earlier, that I felt it was a more impactful technology to millennials than any other generation. AOL Instant Messenger was officially released on this day, May 1st, 1997. IMing, Jill, that was you spend time on your away message, song lyrics at the bottom. Are you sad? Are you happy? Secret messages for your friends in there, where you were partying that night, because we didn't have text message. Many of us didn't have cell phones. So you left up your away message on AOL Instant Messenger to make people aware of, your whereabouts.
The simpler days.
Simpler days.
But
and
not so simple, actually. A little complicated.
More complicated in certain ways, but we made do. We made do there with IM. Eventually IM is acquired as Verizon is acquired by AOL. They shut down AIM in 2017, but it had a good 20-year run there. The first 10, much more significant than the last 10. All right, a bit of pop culture news as we end here on this day in history. Orson Welles' Citizen Kane premiered in theaters. It is often named the best film of all time. Destiny's Child premiered Survivor 24 years ago today, May 1st, 2001. Now, it wasn't only the Survivor song, it was a Survivor album. And on that album, we also got ourselves Bootylicious and Independent Woman.
Now that was an album.
That's an album, folks.
That's how you do it. All right, we're going to leave it there. Thank you guys for listening to the Mo News podcast. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends. It will help us grow. Follow us, subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and review us in the App Store. Those reviews really do help.
The reviews help. We appreciate your support. We appreciate you spreading the word for Mo News and Mo News Premium. For those of you who haven't joined yet, what are you waiting for? Mo.news/premium to join for extra access. We have a special podcast out today that dives deep just for premium members into the Canadian election. What happened, what's going to happen, our relationship between the two countries over there on the Mo News Premium podcast. And that's just a bit of what you get there. Early access, exclusive episodes, premium Instagram. And coming up later this month, we'll have some really interesting, fun things we're announcing for our website. And you're going to be like, how can I not become a premium member? So get in while the getting is good. Is that the expression?
It can be.
It can be. We're making it a thing.
Why not?
We're making it a thing.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the Mo News podcast. Have a fantastic day. I hope you enjoyed.